Known as the Great Crash of 1929, it marked the end of the Roaring Twenties and ushered in the decade-long Great Depression. After World War I, industrial production in the United States expanded rapidly. Emerging industries, such as automobiles and home appliances, rose, and optimism permeated the entire society. This eventually fueled a frenzied speculative boom, laying a fatal groundwork for the crisis. Lacking effective financial regulation, the market was dominated by laissez-faire economic policies. Banks, corporations, and ordinary people flocked to the stock market one after another, even creating the extraordinary spectacle of a nation of stock investors, with janitors borrowing money to buy shares. Bank officials approved large loans freely, and money flowed into the stock market like water. Meanwhile, workers in factories worked overtime to produce goods, yet no one bought them. The stock price curve rose steeply like a rocket, standing in sharp contrast to the production curve of the real economy below, a vivid visualization of the bubble. On one side, capitalists held lavish parties in their mansions, while on the other, ordinary workers huddled in tiny rented rooms counting their meager wages. Numbers on the stock ticker began to fluctuate slightly, and for the first time, looks of unease appeared on investors' faces. On October 24th, the area outside the gates of the New York Stock Exchange was packed with anxious crowds, and noisy shouts could be heard from inside. Inside the exchange, traders frantically waved their hands to sell stocks. Papers flooded everywhere, and stock price figures plummeted sharply. Several bankers held an emergency meeting in the conference room. Some wiped sweat from their brows, while others made calls to raise funds. After a brief recovery, the stock market curve experienced violent fluctuations once again, and the background music grew increasingly low and oppressive. In the early morning of October 29th, long queues formed outside the stock exchange, and people had desperate looks on their faces. Inside the exchange, chaos was complete. Traders screamed hysterically to sell stocks, and stock price figures plummeted at an alarming rate to 22%. The stock index plummeted by 40% suddenly from its peak of 363 points, and a flood of red text reading bankrupt and penniless flashed on the screen. Former millionaires stood outside the stock exchange weeping. One speculator knelt on the ground, while another jumped from a tall building. The entrance of banks was packed with crowds rushing to withdraw money, and the bank doors were sealed with notices reading "closed down." Ordinary people cried and shouted at the bank entrance, with a slow-motion shot of savings books being torn to pieces. Factory gates were tightly shut, covered with signs reading "work suspended" and "bankrupt," while workers left in low spirits. The unemployment rate curve soared sharply to over 30%, and long lines of unemployed people stretched along the streets of the United States. In the cold winter, unemployed people queued up for relief food, and some lived in Hoovervilles, slums made of cardboard and iron sheets. In an animated global map, the crisis in the United States spread rapidly to capitalist countries in Europe, Asia, and beyond like red ripples. Goods piled up like mountains at ports around the world, and the trade volume curve plummeted sharply to the level of 1919. The symbol of the gold standard shattered, and currencies of various countries, British pound, US dollar, French franc, split into different currency blocks. In 1933, Roosevelt stood on the inauguration platform and delivered a speech with firm resolve, with the large characters "New Deal" appearing in the background. Banks reopened, workers returned to work to build dams and highways, farmers reduced their cultivated land, and the unemployed received relief and participated in public works projects. The US economic curve slowly rebounded from its lowest point. Factory chimneys started emitting smoke again, and hopeful expressions gradually returned to people's faces. Modern stock market screens and black and white photos from 1929 flashed alternately, with keywords such as regulation, bubble, balance, and intervention overlaid. The current scene of Wall Street slowly faded into the historical black and white photos, and the text "respect the market, invest rationally, improve supervision" appeared as the image faded out.